Wait! Don't enter your car! The boy's voice cut through the peaceful afternoon like a gunshot, shrill and desperate, stopping Augustus James mid-stride with his hand hovering inches from the door of his black SUV. No one shouted at the most feared man in Blackwater City. No one ran at him the way this 8-year-old was running now. Backpack flying, sneakers slapping pavement, terror written across his face. But Augustus didn't signal his bodyguards to intercede, because in 20 years of surviving assassination attempts, he'd learned to recognize one sound above all others, the sound of someone who'd just seen death coming. The afternoon sun pressed down on Willow Creek Lane like a weight, turning the manicured lawns of Blackwater City's wealthiest suburb into a postcard of American perfection. Everything about this street screamed safety. Trimmed hedges standing at attention, identical mailboxes lining the curb, security gates that promised the outside world couldn't reach these pristine homes. If you're excited to dive into this story, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more amazing stories. And believe me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's jump into the story. Augustus James had just concluded a discreet meeting inside one of these mansions. The kind of meeting where handshakes meant more than contracts, and silence was more valuable than gold. He adjusted his suit jacket with practiced precision as he emerged into the sunlight, every movement controlled, deliberate. The sharp cut of his black suit couldn't quite hide the tattoos creeping up his neck from beneath his collar, intricate designs that disappeared into his crisp white shirt like secrets being swallowed. Everything about him radiated power, cold gray eyes that had witnessed horrors most men couldn't imagine, a jaw set in permanent calculation, hands that had built an empire and buried those who challenged it. People whispered his name in restaurants and crossed the street when they saw his SUV approaching. Enemies avoided speaking it altogether. Allies respected it above all else. He was Augustus James, the Mafia boss of Blackwater City. And on this ordinary Tuesday afternoon, death wasn't supposed to find him on a tree-lined suburban street. But it had tried anyway. The boy skidded to a stop 5 feet from Augustus, chest heaving, his face flushed crimson with exertion and fear. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, all gangly limbs and oversized hand-me-down clothes. His brown hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. His green t-shirt bore grass stains from recess. He looked absolutely terrified and absolutely determined. 2 men in dark suits materialized from their positions near the mansion's entrance, hands moving with practiced efficiency toward concealed weapons. Their bodies angled toward the child with lethal precision, ready to eliminate any threat to their boss. Augustus raised one hand, a single silent command. Stand down. The bodyguards froze but didn't relax. Their eyes remained locked on the boy, fingers still hovering near their weapons. Augustus turned his full attention to the child, his expression unreadable. No irritation, no anger. Just cold assessment, the way a predator might study something unexpected in its territory. Boy, Augustus said, his voice low and controlled, each syllable measured like a blade being drawn from its sheath. You have exactly 5 seconds to explain yourself. The child pointed at the SUV with a trembling hand, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. There's something under your car, he gasped, fighting for breath. A man put it there, just now. It looked wrong, really, really wrong. For a split second, Augustus's expression remained perfectly neutral. But anyone who knew him, anyone who'd worked for him long enough to read the microscopic shifts in his demeanor, would have recognized what happened next. Every muscle in his body went taut. His eyes sharpened into points of focused intensity. Because Augustus James hadn't survived 2 decades in one of America's most dangerous cities by ignoring warnings. He gestured once, sharp, silent, absolute. His men moved instantly, dropping to their knees beside the SUV, sweeping beneath the vehicle with flashlights and trained eyes. One pulled a small mirror on an extendable rod from his jacket, standard counter-surveillance equipment. The quiet suburban street suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. Birds stopped singing. The breeze seemed to pause mid-gust. Even the sun felt like it had stopped moving across the sky. 3 seconds of silence. Then one of the bodyguards cursed, a violent, explosive sound that shattered the tension. "Boss!" The man's voice was tight, controlled panic bleeding through professional training. "We've got a device. Armed. Timed trigger. Commercial-grade explosive." The world tilted slightly. Augustus's jaw tightened, the only visible reaction he allowed himself. Someone had tried to kill him. Here, on a clean, perfect suburban street where soccer moms drove minivans and children rode bicycles. Someone had planted a bomb under his vehicle in broad daylight, and an 8-year-old stranger had just saved his life. Augustus turned slowly back to the boy, who stood frozen on the sidewalk, his eyes wide as he processed what the bodyguard had just confirmed. The child's face had gone pale, all the earlier determination draining away as reality crashed over him. He'd been right. It really had been a bomb. "What's your name?" Augustus asked quietly, his tone shifting into something almost gentle, though that word had no place in his vocabulary. "Chamberlain," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible. "Chamberlain Cole." Augustus studied him for a long moment. The worn sneakers with holes in the toes, the too big t-shirt that had clearly been handed down from someone older, the backpack lying abandoned on the sidewalk where it had fallen during the boy's desperate sprint. This wasn't some privileged child from one of these mansions. This was a kid from the other side of town. The part of Blackwater City where Augustus's world usually did its business, where poverty and desperation lived side by side with violence and survival. "How did you see it?" Augustus asked. Chamberlain swallowed hard, finding his voice. "I was walking home from school. I saw a man. He was dressed all in black. He knelt down by your car and put something underneath it. Then he ran away really fast." "What time?" Maybe 20 minutes ago. I hid behind that hedge." Chamberlain pointed to the nearby shrubbery. "I didn't know what to do, but then you came outside and I couldn't." His voice broke. The weight of what he'd just witnessed, what he'd just prevented, was finally hitting him. One of Augustus's men approached, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid, clipped sentences. "Bomb squad's en route. ETA 4 minutes. Clearing the perimeter now." Augustus nodded but didn't take his eyes off Chamberlain. In 20 years of running the most powerful criminal organization in Blackwater City, Augustus had learned to read people the way others read books. He could spot a liar at 50 paces, identify an undercover cop by the way they held their coffee, and sense betrayal before it even formed in someone's mind. This boy? There wasn't a trace of deception in him, just pure, honest terror mixed with the kind of moral courage Augustus hadn't seen in most grown men. The kind of courage that had just saved his life. "Chamberlain Cole," Augustus said, letting the name settle in the air between them. "You and I need to have a very serious conversation." The boy nodded mutely, still trembling. "But first," Augustus continued, his voice taking on an edge that made his bodyguard straighten, "you're going to tell me exactly what this man looked like, where he went, and every single detail you can remember." Because Augustus James never forgot a debt, and he never, ever left one unpaid. But to understand how an 8-year-old boy ended up saving a mafia boss's life, and why that single act of courage would transform both of their worlds forever. You have to go back 3 hours earlier. Back to a boy walking home alone from school. Back to a child who noticed everything in a world that desperately wanted him to see nothing. Back to the moment Chamberlain Cole's extraordinary observation skills became both his greatest gift and his most dangerous curse. The bomb technician arrived in an unmarked van 6 minutes later, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who understood exactly how fragile the next few moments could be. Willow Creek Lane had transformed into something unrecognizable. Police barriers blocked both ends of the street. Neighbors pressed against their windows, phones recording everything. Augustus's men had formed a perimeter around the SUV, their bodies tense, hands never straying far from concealed weapons. Chamberlain stood beside Augustus, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. The technician, a compact woman with gray streaking her dark hair, dropped to her knees beside the vehicle. Her movements were precise, methodical. She swept the area with handheld sensors, studied the device through a fiber optic camera, took photographs from multiple angles. 2 minutes passed in suffocating silence. Then she stood, pulling off her gloves with controlled force. "You need to see this." Her voice was tight. Augustus moved closer. Chamberlain started to follow, but one of the bodyguards placed a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. The technician pointed at her tablet screen, displaying close-up images of the device. "This isn't standard. Military-grade C4, yes, but the configuration..." She swiped to another image. "These are directional charges, angled outward toward the street and sidewalk." Augustus's expression hardened into something dangerous. "Meaning?" "Meaning whoever built this didn't just want you dead." The technician met his eyes. "They wanted to take out anyone within 30 feet. Pedestrians, neighbors, kids on bicycles." Her gaze flickered briefly to Chamberlain. This was designed for maximum collateral damage. The implications crashed over Augustus like ice water. This wasn't an assassination. It was a message, a declaration of war wrapped in explosive charges and civilian casualties. Someone wanted to show him they'd kill innocents just to make a point. Augustus turned to Chamberlain, his voice carefully controlled. "The man you saw. Describe him." Chamberlain's hands twisted together nervously. "He was tall, maybe your height, dark hoodie, black pants. He had something on his face, like a bandana covering his nose and mouth. But I saw his eyes." The boy paused, remembering. They were really light, almost gray, and he had a tattoo on his hand, like a bird or something with wings. One of Augustus's bodyguards, the one called Marcus, pulled out his phone, scrolling rapidly. He showed Augustus an image. "Vescari's crew. They used that marking. Phoenix Rising." Augustus studied the photo, his jaw tightening. Leonardo Vescari, the only man in Blackwater City with both the resources and the stupidity to try something this brazen. "Boss?" Marcus hesitated. "Device matches their signature. The directional charges. The timing mechanism, it's the same design from the warehouse hit in March." So it was confirmed. Vescari had just declared war in the most public, most vicious way possible. Chamberlain shifted his weight, drawing Augustus's attention back. "Sir?" The boy's voice was small. I think I saw him before." Augustus's focus sharpened instantly. "Where?" "Near my apartment building, last week. Tuesday, maybe?" Chamberlain's forehead wrinkled in concentration. "I was coming home from school, and I saw him standing by the corner store. Just standing there, watching people. I remember because of his eyes. They were so pale." The street seemed to tilt. Augustus exchanged glances with Marcus, and the unspoken communication between them carried the weight of years working together. If Vescari's man had been surveilling Chamberlain's neighborhood a week ago, if he'd been watching that building, then this wasn't a random encounter. Chamberlain had been noticed, marked, perhaps even targeted. But why? "Where do you live?" Augustus asked quietly. "Riverside Apartments, Building C, 3rd floor." Chamberlain looked between the men, reading their expressions the way he read everything else. "Is something wrong?" Everything was wrong. Augustus made a decision. "Marcus, bring the car around. Not that one." He gestured toward the SUV with its deadly cargo. "The sedan." "Boss, I'm taking the boy home myself." Riverside Apartments looked exactly like Augustus expected. Weathered brick, rusted balcony railings, overflowing dumpsters in the parking lot. The kind of place where broken things stayed broken because no one had the money or energy to fix them. Chamberlain led him up the concrete stairs to Unit 317. The boy's hands shook as he unlocked the door. Inside, the apartment was small, but meticulously clean. A cramped living room with a worn couch, a kitchen table stacked with medical bills and past due notices. Photographs of Chamberlain and a tired-looking woman covered one wall. Birthday parties, school pictures, moments captured in cheaper frames. Augustus noticed everything. The patched jacket hanging by the door, the empty refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway, the electricity shut-off warning taped to the counter. This was survival. Not life. Survival. "My mom works at the hospital," Chamberlain said softly, following Augustus's gaze. "She won't be home until late." Augustus pulled out his phone, typing rapid instructions to Marcus. Security detail. Background check. Surveillance sweep of the building. Because now he understood something that made his blood run cold. Whoever planted that device had been watching this neighborhood, watching this building, watching this boy. They'd seen Chamberlain near Augustus's meeting location and drawn a connection that didn't exist. Yet. Augustus looked at the child standing in his threadbare living room, still wearing that grass-stained green shirt, still trembling slightly from everything he'd witnessed. A boy who'd saved his life. A boy who was now in danger because of it. Whoever planted that device thinks this boy matters to me. And the truly terrifying part? They weren't wrong anymore. Chapter 3. A target is marked. Augustus didn't sleep that night. From his downtown penthouse, he made calls. Quiet, clipped conversations that set machinery into motion across Blackwater City. By 3:00 a.m., two of his most trusted men, Marcus and a former military operative named Sullivan, were positioned outside Riverside Apartments in an unmarked vehicle. Their orders were simple. Watch, document, report. By sunrise, they'd found enough to confirm Augustus's worst fears. "Boss," Marcus's voice crackled through the encrypted line at 6:47 a.m. "We've got activity." Augustus was already dressed, coffee untouched on his desk. "Talk." Fresh cigarette butts, Marlboro Reds, at least a dozen, concentrated near the building's east entrance. Someone's been standing watch. Marcus paused. Sullivan found footprints in the mud by the dumpster area. Size 11 boots, military tread. Same position gives clear sightline to Unit 3117. Augustus's jaw tightened. Current status? That's the problem. Black Dodge Charger, tinted windows, parked across the street when we arrived. Driver spotted us and peeled out. Sullivan got partials on the plate. Run them. Already did. Registered to a shell company. Same one Vescari used for the warehouse operation. So it was confirmed. They weren't just watching. They were preparing. Stay on site, Augustus ordered. The boy leaves for school at 7:30. No one gets near him. He ended the call and reached for his jacket. Chamberlain emerged from Building C at exactly 7:33 a.m., backpack slung over one shoulder, his mother's worried voice trailing after him through the open door. He made it 4 steps down the sidewalk. A man in a gray hoodie materialized from behind a delivery truck, moving with purpose toward the boy. Marcus intercepted him in 3 strides. The man's hand had already moved toward his waistband when Sullivan came from the opposite angle, weapon drawn but concealed beneath his jacket. "Don't," Sullivan said quietly. The man froze, eyes darting, calculating odds he didn't like. "Hands where I can see them, slowly." 2 minutes later, the lookout was zip-tied in the back of Marcus's vehicle, his gray hoodie soaked with nervous sweat. Chamberlain had been hustled back inside his apartment, confused and frightened, his mother holding him tight while demanding answers no one would give her yet. Augustus arrived 20 minutes later. He slid into the back seat beside the lookout, his presence filling the cramped space like a storm front. "Name," Augustus said flatly. The man's jaw clenched. "I want a lawyer." "You're not under arrest." Augustus's voice dropped to something colder. "Which means you have no rights, only choices." Marcus started the engine. The car began moving, heading away from the apartment complex toward industrial areas where buildings stood empty and screams went unheard. The lookout's bravado cracked. Wait, Why were you watching the boy?" Silence. Augustus leaned forward slightly. "I'm going to ask you one more time. After that, we take a drive you won't enjoy." The man's resistance shattered. "They want him silenced, okay? The kid saw the bomber's face, Vascari's orders. He saw too much." The words hung in the air like poison. "How long have you been watching him?" 3 days, since the device failed." "They figured out some kid warned you, found out who he was, where he lived." The lookout's words came faster now, desperate. "I was just supposed to report his movements. That's it. I swear." "And then?" The man's silence was answer enough. Augustus felt something dangerous crystallize in his chest. Not rage. Rage was hot, impulsive, sloppy. This was colder, more absolute. They were going to kill a child to tie up loose ends, a child who'd saved his life. "Marcus," Augustus said quietly, "take him to the warehouse. I'll deal with him later." He exited the vehicle outside Riverside Apartments and took the stairs to Unit 3 and 17, 2 at a time. Diane Cole opened the door on the 3rd knock, her face pale with barely contained panic. Behind her, Chamberlain sat on the couch, still wearing his backpack, looking smaller than ever. "What's happening?" Diane's voice shook. "Those men said my son was in danger. They wouldn't explain." "Mrs. Cole." Augustus stepped inside, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your son witnessed a crime yesterday. The people responsible know he can identify them." "I don't understand. What does this have to do with—" Her eyes widened. "You. This is because of you." "Yes." The blunt honesty seemed to stagger her. "My son saved your life, and now you've made him a target?" He became a target the moment he saw that bomber's face. Augustus held her gaze. "Whether I was involved or not, these people don't leave witnesses." Diane's hand covered her mouth. "Oh God, Chamberlain." "Mom?" The boy's voice was small from the couch. Augustus moved toward them both, his voice steady, controlled. "I have a facility. Secure. Guarded 24/7. You'll both be safe there until I eliminate this threat." "A facility?" Diane's laugh was brittle, disbelieving. You mean a safe house? You want us to go into hiding with the Mafia? I want you alive. The words cut through her panic like a blade. Augustus crouched to meet Chamberlain's eyes. You saved my life yesterday. Now I'm going to save yours. But you have to trust me. Chamberlain looked at his mother, then back at Augustus. The man outside, he was going to hurt me? Not while I'm breathing. Diane made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. This is insane. We can go to the police. The police can't protect you from what's coming. Augustus stood. Pack essentials. 1 bag each. We leave in 10 minutes. And if I refuse? Augustus met her eyes with brutal honesty. Then I'll attend your funerals next week. The apartment fell silent except for Chamberlain's quiet breathing. Diane looked at her son, at the medical bills on the table, at the life they'd built from nothing in this cramped, struggling space. Then she looked at the man who'd brought a war to their doorstep. 10 minutes, she whispered. Augustus nodded once and pulled out his phone. Marcus, bring the convoy. We're moving them now. You're absolutely right, and I apologize for the confusion. Here is Chapter 4 as a complete standalone piece. Chapter 4. Safe House, Dangerous Truths. The safe house sat 30 miles outside Blackwater City, hidden behind iron gates and a forest of pine trees that blocked it from the nearest road. Augustus's convoy, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, rolled through the entrance as armed guards closed the gates behind them. Chamberlain pressed his face against the window, eyes wide. The property was massive, a 3-story stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home. Security cameras tracked their approach from every angle. Motion sensors blinked red along the perimeter fence. Men in tactical gear patrolled in coordinated rotations, weapons visible and ready. This is where you live? Chamberlain whispered. One of several places, Augustus replied. This one is specialized. Diane clutched her single-packed bag like a lifeline, her knuckles white. She hadn't spoken during the entire drive, her jaw set in that particular way that meant she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. Inside, the safe house was surprisingly comfortable. Hardwood floors, leather furniture, a kitchen stocked better than any Chamberlain had ever seen. But underneath the comfort, the fortress revealed itself. Reinforced steel doors, bulletproof windows, panic buttons embedded in every wall. Marcus gave them the tour with military efficiency. Master bedroom, 2nd floor. Mrs. Cole, that's yours. Boy gets the room next door. He pointed down a hallway. Bathrooms are stocked. Kitchen is accessible 24/7. Don't go outside without clearance. And if something happens? Diane's voice was strained. Marcus opened a closet door, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Underground panic room, reinforced concrete, independent air supply, encrypted communications. If the alarm sounds, you go down and you don't come up until one of us gives the all clear. Chamberlain peered down the stairs, fascinated despite his fear. Augustus watched the boy's reaction with something almost resembling amusement. Most people looked at the panic room with dread. Chamberlain looked at it like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever seen. Can I see it? The boy asked. Later, Augustus said. First, you eat. Dinner was surreal. Chamberlain sat at a dining table bigger than his entire living room, eating pasta that hadn't come from a box, while armed men rotated through the kitchen for shift changes. His mother picked at her food, unable to shake the look of someone who'd woken up in someone else's life. Augustus's lieutenant, a sharp-eyed man named Vincent, arrived as they finished eating. He carried a tablet and the kind of tension that meant bad news. Boss, word's spreading. Vincent kept his voice low but not low enough. Vescari's making moves. He's framing this as an opportunity, testing your response time, seeing if protecting civilians makes you weak. Augustus's expression went cold. Let him think what he wants. It's a power move, using the kid as bait to start a wider conflict. Vincent glanced at Chamberlain, then back to Augustus. Every family in the city is watching how you handle this. Then they'll see me handle it permanently. Chamberlain absorbed every word, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Diane noticed and placed a protective hand on his shoulder. Maybe we shouldn't discuss this here, she said tightly. Augustus nodded to Vincent, who retreated to the surveillance room. Later, after Diane had gone upstairs to unpack, or more likely to cry in private, Chamberlain found Augustus standing by the window overlooking the property's eastern perimeter. The boy approached hesitantly, clutching a book he'd found on the shelf. Mr. James? Augustus is fine. Why are you helping us? The question was simple, direct, painfully honest. You don't even know us. Augustus studied the child for a long moment. Most people asked him questions that were really negotiations or threats disguised as curiosity. This was different. This was genuine. You saved my life, Augustus said simply. But you're scary. Everyone's afraid of you. Chamberlain tilted his head. Are you a bad person? The bluntness should have been offensive. Instead, Augustus found himself almost smiling. That depends on who you ask. I'm asking you? Augustus crouched to meet the boy's eye level, something he hadn't done in years. I've done things most people would call bad, but I protect what's mine. And right now, you and your mother are mine to protect. Because I saved you? Because you did the right thing when it would have been easier to do nothing. Augustus's voice softened slightly. That's rare, worth protecting. Chamberlain considered this, his young mind working through concepts too heavy for his age. My mom says good people help people. Does that make you good now? I think your mom is smarter than both of us. The boy smiled. Small, tentative, but real. A door opened upstairs. Diane appeared on the landing, her face less pale than before, her shoulders straightening with reluctant acceptance. Chamberlain, bedtime. But Mom, now, baby. Chamberlain sighed but obeyed, heading toward the stairs. Halfway up, he turned back. Augustus? Yes? Thank you for keeping us safe. Something unfamiliar stirred in Augustus's chest. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Responsibility. Not the cold, calculated kind that came with running an organization. The personal kind. He nodded once, and the boy disappeared upstairs. Augustus was reviewing security footage in the surveillance room when Marcus entered, his face grim. Boss, you need to see this. Marcus handed him a phone, a burner recovered from the lookout they'd captured that morning. A single text message glowed on the screen, time-stamped from 15 minutes ago. We know where he is. Augustus's jaw tightened. His hand closed around the phone with enough force that the screen cracked. How? Unknown. Could be a guess. Could be a mole. Could be tracking tech we haven't found yet. Marcus hesitated. Could be a bluff to make us panic. Viscari doesn't bluff. Augustus stood, his mind already calculating responses, countermoves, eliminations. Double the perimeter guard. Rotate shifts every 4 hours. No one enters or leaves without my direct authorization. And the woman and kid? Augustus moved toward the window, staring out at the dark forest surrounding the property. Somewhere out there, in the shadows, enemies were circling. They don't leave this building, he said quietly. Not until I end this. Outside, the security lights cast long shadows across the grounds. Inside, Chamberlain slept in a room bigger than his entire apartment, unaware that the war he'd stumbled into was about to escalate. And in the surveillance room, Augustus James made a silent vow. They'd come for the boy, and when they did, they'd learn exactly why people feared his name. Chapter 5. The First Attempt on Chamberlain. 3 days of relative calm shattered on a Tuesday morning. Chamberlain had been restless, trapped inside the safe house like a caged bird. His mother had argued with Augustus about normalcy, about her son missing school, about the psychological toll of living in constant fear. Augustus compromised. A tutor would come to the property. Chamberlain could have his lessons in the library, under guard, behind bulletproof glass, with armed men stationed at every exit. It should have been safe. The tutor arrived at 10 a.m. in a pre-approved vehicle, passing through 3 security checkpoints. Chamberlain walked from the main house to the converted guest house where lessons would take place, flanked by Marcus and another guard named Torres. 50 feet. That's all the distance he had to cover. He made it 30. The explosion came first, a flashbang that detonated near the western perimeter, drawing half the security detail toward the breach. Then the eastern gate buckled inward as a reinforced truck rammed through it. Chaos erupted in seconds. "Get down!" Marcus shoved Chamberlain to the ground as gunfire erupted across the property. 3 masked men emerged from the smoke, moving with military precision. They weren't shooting to kill the guards, they were shooting to create openings. One of them reached Chamberlain before Marcus could react. The man grabbed the boy's backpack, yanking him backward. Chamberlain screamed, his feet leaving the ground as he was dragged toward the breached gate. "Mom! Augustus!" Torres took a bullet to the shoulder but kept firing, dropping one attacker. Marcus sprinted after the man carrying Chamberlain, weapon raised but unable to shoot without risking the boy. The kidnapper was fast, trained, desperate, but not fast enough. Augustus materialized from the main house like something unleashed from hell itself. He covered the distance in seconds, his movements fluid and lethal. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need one. Augustus hit the kidnapper with the full force of his body, both men crashing to the pavement. Chamberlain rolled free, gasping. The masked man tried to reach for his sidearm. Augustus broke his arm with an audible crack, then his jaw, then drove his knee into the man's ribs with enough force that something vital gave way. "Augustus, we need him alive!" Marcus shouted. Augustus stopped. Barely. His fist hovered inches from delivering a killing blow. The attacker coughed blood, eyes rolling with pain and terror. "Secure him," Augustus said flatly, standing. His suit was torn, knuckles bleeding, but his voice remained eerily controlled. He turned to Chamberlain, who sat trembling on the ground, and crouched beside him. "Are you hurt?" Chamberlain shook his head mutely, tears streaming down his face. "Look at me." Augustus's voice softened. "You're safe. I've got you." The captured attacker lasted 20 minutes under interrogation before breaking completely. "Vescari?" he gasped through broken teeth. "Leonardo Vescari. He's offering $2 million for the kid. Dead or alive." Augustus stood in the corner of the room, perfectly still, listening. "The hit on your car was his. The surveillance on the apartment was his." The man coughed blood. "He wants you vulnerable. Thinks protecting civilians makes you weak." "Where is he?" "I don't know, I swear. He uses cutouts, proxies." Augustus stepped forward. The man flinched violently. "Find out," Augustus said quietly to Marcus. Then to the prisoner. "You're going to tell us everything you've ever heard about Leonardo Vescari. Every location, every associate, every habit. And if I do, you live in a cell forever." But you live. The man nodded frantically. Upstairs, Diane Cole sat in Chamberlain's room, holding her son while he shook. When Augustus entered, she looked up with red, swollen eyes. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should never have let him warn you. Should have grabbed him, driven away. Mrs. Cole, he's 8 years old." Her voice cracked. "He should be worried about math homework and playground games, not men with guns trying to kidnap him." Augustus stood silent for a moment, then pulled a chair over and sat. The gesture was awkward, unpracticed. Comfort wasn't in his repertoire. "Your son did what most adults wouldn't have the courage to do," Augustus said. "He saw danger and ran toward it to save a stranger. That's not your fault. That's who he is." Diane wiped her eyes. "And now he's paying for it." "No, now I'm paying my debt." Augustus's voice carried absolute conviction. "This ends when Viscari ends. And that happens soon." Chamberlain looked up from his mother's embrace. "You promise?" Augustus met the boy's eyes. "I promise." Later, in the surveillance room, Augustus addressed his assembled men. 15 of his most trusted operatives stood at attention. "Leonardo Viscari just made his biggest mistake," Augustus said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "He came after a child under my protection. He attacked my property. He declared war." He paused, letting the words settle. "No one touches that boy. Chamberlain Cole saved my life. Now I save his. Whatever it costs. Whoever stands in the way." Augustus's eyes swept across each face. "We're going hunting, and we don't stop until Viscari is in the ground." The men nodded as one. Outside, night was falling over the safe house. Inside, Chamberlain finally slept, exhausted from terror, and Augustus James prepared for war. Chapter 6. War in Blackwater City. Blackwater City burned with invisible fires. Augustus's retaliation came swift and systematic. Within 48 hours of the safe house attack, 3 of Viscari's gambling operations went dark. 2 of his lieutenants disappeared. Street corners that had been Viscari territory for a decade suddenly flew different colors. The message was clear. Touch what's mine, and I'll dismantle everything you've built. Marcus coordinated from a war room Augustus had established in the safe house basement. Walls covered with photographs, locations, known associates. Phone calls were made in coded language. Money changed hands in shadowy parking lots. Informants whispered names in exchange for protection or threats. "Viscari's bleeding resources," Marcus reported during a late-night briefing. "He's pulled back from the docks, consolidated his men. He knows you're coming." "Good." Augustus studied a map of the city, red pins marking Viscari's known locations. "Fear makes men sloppy. Keep the pressure on." Upstairs, a different kind of war was being fought. Chamberlain had stopped asking when he could go home. The safe house had become his entire world, a strange, fortified bubble where armed men nodded at him in hallways and his mother looked perpetually exhausted despite sleeping in a comfortable bed for the first time in years. He'd created routines: breakfast at 7, lessons with the tutor from 9 to noon, lunch in the massive kitchen where the cook, an older woman named Rosa, always made him extra portions. Afternoons in the library reading books he'd never have found at his underfunded school. But at night, he missed his small apartment, his own bed. The sounds of the city through thin walls. He found Augustus on the back terrace one evening, staring out at the tree line where guards patrolled with flashlights. "Do you ever get lonely?" Chamberlain asked. Augustus glanced down at the boy. "That's a complicated question." "Mom says you don't have a family, that you live alone," Your mother talks about me?
She's trying to figure you out.
Chamberlain climbed onto the bench beside Augustus.
So am I.
Augustus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Chamberlain had never heard before. I had a brother once, younger than me, about your age actually. Augustus's jaw tightened. We grew up in a neighborhood worse than Riverside. My father drank. My mother worked 3 jobs. We had nothing. Chamberlain listened, barely breathing. One night, my brother witnessed something he shouldn't have. Wrong place, wrong time, just like you. Augustus's hands curled into fists. The people involved decided a witness was a liability. They made him disappear. I was 12. Couldn't protect him. Couldn't stop it.
Is that why you became...
Chamberlain struggled for the right word.
What I am?
Augustus looked at the boy.
Yes.
I learned that in this world, power is the only thing that keeps people safe. So I built power. Enough that no one could ever take from me again. But you're using it to protect us now, Chamberlain said softly.
That's good, right?
Augustus almost smiled.
You remind me of him. Always asking questions, always seeing the best in people who probably don't deserve it.
I think you do, Chamberlain said.
Deserve it.
I mean, something shifted in Augustus's expression, a crack in armor he'd worn for decades. Inside, Diane watched through the window as her son sat beside the most dangerous man in Blackwater City, talking like they were old friends. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something unexpected, gratitude. Augustus had kept every promise. Her son was alive. She was alive. They had food, safety, protection. And more than that, she'd seen how Augustus looked at Chamberlain, not like an obligation or a burden, like someone worth protecting. Rosa appeared beside her, carrying folded laundry. He's different with the boy. What do you mean? I've worked for Mr. James for 8 years. Never seen him like this. Rosa smiled gently. He was broken before. I think your son is fixing something in him he didn't know was still wounded. Diane swallowed hard, emotions she couldn't name tightening her throat. The call came at 2 a.m. Augustus was awake. He rarely slept more than 4 hours, when Marcus burst into his office.
Boss, we got intel from one of Vescari's former drivers. He flipped. And?
Marcus's expression was grim.
Vescari's planning something big, a final move. He's brought in specialists from Detroit, explosives experts.
Augustus's blood went cold.
Target? He didn't know specifics, but he heard one thing clearly.
Marcus paused.
They're not coming for you this time. They're coming for the safe house. They want to prove you can't protect the boy, that your word means nothing.
Augustus stood slowly, every muscle in his body coiling with lethal intent. When? Soon. Maybe days, maybe hours. Augustus moved to the window, staring out at the peaceful grounds that were about to become a battlefield. Vescari had made his final mistake. He'd threatened the one thing Augustus had sworn to protect. Lockdown protocol, Augustus said quietly. No one in or out. Triple the perimeter. Sweep every inch of this property for vulnerabilities. He turned to face Marcus. And find me Leonardo Vescari's location. I don't care what it costs. And if he comes here first? Augustus's smile was terrifying. Then I end this war on my own doorstep. The bomb squad arrived at dawn. Their equipment spread across the safe house lawn like surgical instruments preparing for delicate surgery. Augustus watched from the command center as they worked the perimeter, sensors sweeping every inch of fencing, every tree line approach, every possible breach point. It took them 40 minutes to find it.
Boss?
The lead technician's voice crackled through the radio.
Northeast corner, near the service gate. We've got residue. C4 signature. Recent placement. Maybe 12 hours old.
Augustus's jaw clenched.
How much? Enough to breach the fence and create an entry point. This isn't about destroying the house.
The technician paused.
This is about getting inside.
So Vescari wasn't trying to blow them up from a distance. He was coming through the front door.
Full lockdown,
Augustus commanded.
Seal every entrance. Chamberlain and his mother go to the panic room. Now.
Marcus moved immediately, but Augustus caught his arm.
Check every guard. Personal searches, phones, communications, everything.
You think we've got a leak? I think Vescari knew exactly where to place those charges. They found the traitor 20 minutes later. His name was Davis, a guard Augustus had hired 8 months ago on Marcus's recommendation. Good record, former military police, no obvious red flags, except for the encrypted phone hidden in his locker, and the $200,000 wire transfer to an offshore account, and the text message that read, "Gate opens at 2200. Come heavy." Marcus dragged Davis into Augustus's office at gunpoint, shoving him into a chair. "How long?" Augustus asked quietly. Davis said nothing, jaw set in defiance. Augustus moved faster than thought, his hand closing around Davis's throat.
How long?
2 weeks, Davis gasped.
Since the apartment. Vescari approached me, said you'd get the kid killed anyway. Might as well profit.
Augustus released him with disgust.
Marcus, secure him in the basement. I'll deal with him after. Boss, they're coming tonight. I know.
Augustus checked his weapon, a matte black Sig Sauer he'd carried for 15 years.
Which means we'll be ready.
The attack came at exactly 2200. 2 vehicles rammed the northeast gate simultaneously, the explosion residue having weakened the structure enough that it buckled on impact. Vescari's men poured through, 12 of them, masked and armed with military-grade weapons. Augustus's defensive positions opened fire immediately. The night erupted in chaos, muzzle flashes, shouted orders, the sharp crack of rifle fire echoing across the property. Chamberlain huddled in the underground panic room with his mother, her arms wrapped around him. Both of them flinching at every sound from above.
Augustus promised,
Chamberlain whispered.
He promised we'd be safe.
Diane held him tighter, praying her son's faith wasn't misplaced. Above ground, the battle was brutal and precise. Augustus's men had the advantage of position and preparation. Vescari's team had desperation and numbers. 3 of Augustus's guards went down in the first minute, but they took 5 attackers with them. Marcus coordinated from the western position, his rifle dropping targets with mechanical efficiency. Augustus moved through the chaos like death incarnate, his movements economical and lethal. He wasn't fighting defensively. He was hunting. 2 of Vescari's men breached the main house, heading for the panic room entrance. Augustus intercepted them in the hallway. The first man died before he registered movement. 3 shots, center mass, no hesitation. The second managed to raise his weapon. Augustus closed the distance, disarmed him with brutal efficiency, and put him on the ground with enough force that his head cracked against marble tile.
Where is Vescari?
Augustus demanded, knee on the man's chest, gun pressed to his temple.
Not here,
the man gasped.
Where?
He's watching, remote location, waiting to confirm. Blood bubbled from the man's mouth.
Waiting to confirm the boy dies?
Augustus pulled the trigger. The gunfire stopped 15 minutes after it started. Vascari's entire team was dead or captured. Augustus's men secured the perimeter, dragging bodies clear, checking for additional threats. Marcus found Augustus standing over Davis in the basement. The traitor zip-tied to a support beam.
"They're all down, boss. We're secure."
Augustus didn't respond. His attention remained fixed on Davis, who'd watched the battle through security monitors.
"You were going to let them kill a child,"
Augustus said softly. Vascari said. Davis swallowed. He said killing the boy would break you, that you'd become sloppy, emotional, weak. And then he'd take everything, your territory, your operations, your...
He was right about one thing.
Augustus's voice dropped to something absolute and final.
Threatening that boy changed me.
He crouched to meet Davis's terrified eyes.
It made me remember what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine.
Augustus stood and walked toward the stairs.
"Marcus, make sure he never testifies. Ever."
Marcus nodded grimly. In the panic room, Augustus opened the reinforced door to find Chamberlain and Diane pressed against the back wall, trembling.
"It's over,"
Augustus said gently.
"You're safe."
Chamberlain ran to him, wrapping small arms around Augustus's waist. The boy was crying, terrified, but alive. Augustus placed a hand on his head, something fierce and protective burning in his chest. Behind them, Marcus appeared in the doorway.
"Boss, we interrogated the survivors, got Vascari's location."
Augustus met his lieutenant's eyes over Chamberlain's head.
"Prep the team,"
Augustus said quietly, cold fury dripping from every word.
"This ends tonight."
The strike team rolled out at midnight. 6 vehicles, 20 men, enough firepower to level a city block. Augustus rode in the lead SUV, silent and focused, his mind running through contingencies and outcomes. Beside him, Marcus checked weapons with methodical precision.
"Vascari's compound has 12 guards on rotation,"
Marcus said.
"Reinforced doors, panic room in the basement, multiple escape routes." "He won't escape,"
Augustus said flatly. Behind them, in the safe house, Diane Cole sat in the living room with the television on, volume low. News helicopters circled something downtown, reports of gang activity and police investigating gunfire. She knew. She knew Augustus had gone to end this. Rosa sat beside her, offering tea that went untouched. "He'll come back," Rosa said quietly. "And if he doesn't, then his men will still protect you. Mr. James doesn't leave things unfinished." Diane pulled a blanket tighter around her shoulders. Upstairs, Chamberlain slept fitfully, exhausted from terror and adrenaline. She'd checked on him 3 times already. "I never thought I'd be praying for a mobster to win a war," Diane whispered. Rosa smiled sadly. "He's not fighting for territory tonight, Mrs. Cole. He's fighting for your son." Vascari's compound sat in an industrial district, hidden behind a legitimate shipping company. Augustus's team hit it like a surgical strike, breaching charges on 2 entry points simultaneously, flashbangs deployed, overwhelming force applied before resistance could organize. The guards never stood a chance. Augustus moved through the chaos with lethal efficiency, his weapon an extension of his will. He wasn't here for a firefight. He was here for one man. They found the bomber in a second-floor apartment, frantically trying to climb out a window. Marcus pulled him back inside, zip-tied him, and threw him into a van where 2 men waited to deliver him to a predetermined drop point.
"Anonymous tip to the FBI," Augustus had ordered. "Let them take credit. Keeps the politicians happy."
The bomber would spend life in a federal prison, but that wasn't enough for Augustus. He needed Vascari. They found him in the panic room, exactly as Marcus predicted. Vescari sat behind a steel desk, a pistol in his hand, but not raised. He was in his 50s, graying hair slicked back, expensive suit rumpled from stress. When Augustus entered, Vescari actually laughed. "The great Augustus James, breaking into my home over a street kid." Augustus said nothing, weapon-trained center mass. "All this," Vescari continued, gesturing vaguely at the destruction above them. "All this chaos, all this war, all these bodies." "For a boy who isn't even yours." "He saved my life." "So what?" Vescari's smile was cruel. "You've had dozens of people save your life over the years. You don't adopt them all." Augustus's expression remained cold, but something shifted in his eyes. "He's 8 years old. He saw danger and ran toward it to protect a stranger. That kind of courage is rare." Augustus took a step forward. "And you tried to kill him for it, tried to turn his good deed into a death sentence. It's business. It's over." Vescari raised his pistol finally, but his hand shook. Augustus was faster. 2 shots. Clean, efficient, final. Leonardo Vescari slumped in his chair. The threat that had consumed Blackwater City for weeks, ending in a basement room with no witnesses except the men Augustus trusted most.
"Make it look like internal conflict," Augustus said quietly. Vescari's own people turned on him. Let the other families draw their own conclusions. Marcus nodded. "And us? We go home." Dawn was breaking when Augustus's convoy rolled back through the safe house gates. Chamberlain was awake, sitting on the front steps despite his mother's protests. When he saw Augustus emerge from the lead vehicle, blood on his sleeve, exhaustion in his eyes, but alive, the boy ran to him. Augustus caught him, crouching down to meet his eye level. "Is it over?" Chamberlain asked, voice small. "It's over." Diane appeared in the doorway, relief and residual fear warring on her face. Augustus met her eyes and nodded once. "Vescari?" "Won't be a problem anymore." Chamberlain pulled back slightly,
Studying Augustus's face with that intense observation that had started everything. "You kept your promise." "Always will." Augustus placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You protect what protects you, Chamberlain, and you protected me first. That means something. That means everything." The boy's eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming relief that came with finally being safe. Diane descended the steps slowly, her hand reaching out to touch Augustus's arm. "Thank you. I don't know how to. I can't." "You don't have to," Augustus said quietly. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had gripped the safe house dissipated. Guards relaxed their stances. Rosa began preparing breakfast for everyone. The sun climbed higher, burning away the darkness of the longest night. Augustus stood, Chamberlain still close beside him, and looked out at the property that had become a fortress. The war was over. The boy was safe. And Augustus James had learned something he'd forgotten years ago. Some debts couldn't be paid with money or power. They could only be paid with protection, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand between innocence and the monsters who'd destroy it. "Come on," Augustus said, guiding Chamberlain toward the house. "You need breakfast, and probably about 12 hours of sleep." "Will you stay?" Chamberlain asked. "While I sleep?" Augustus looked down at the boy who'd saved his life and changed everything. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'll stay." 2 weeks after Vescari's death, the city settled into an uneasy peace. News reports called it a gang consolidation. Police credited increased enforcement. Those who knew the truth, the families, the soldiers, the people who lived in the shadows, understood what had really happened. Augustus James had drawn a line, and everyone saw what happened when someone crossed it. At the safe house, Diane packed their belongings with slow, deliberate movements. The single bag they'd arrived with had somehow multiplied. New clothes Rosa had bought for Chamberlain, toiletries, books the boy had grown attached to. "We can go home now," she said to her reflection in the bedroom mirror. But the words felt hollow. Home was Riverside Apartments, Unit 317, peeling paint and overdue bills and the constant weight of barely surviving. This place, with its security and warmth and the strange family they'd accidentally joined, had become something else entirely. Augustus found her on the back terrace that afternoon, staring out at the grounds where Chamberlain played with Marcus's dog, a massive German shepherd that had inexplicably adopted the boy. "You don't have to leave," Augustus said without preamble. Diane turned, surprised. "The threat's gone. Vescari's dead. We can go back to our lives." "Can you?" Augustus moved to stand beside her. "That apartment isn't safe. The neighborhood isn't safe. And after everything that happened..." He paused. "Chamberlain deserves better." "I can't afford better." The admission tasted like defeat. "I can." Diane looked at him sharply. "I'm not asking for charity." "I'm not offering it." Augustus's voice was firm but not unkind. "I'm offering protection, a home, security. Chamberlain can go to a good school. You can work without killing yourself on double shifts. Or not work at all if you choose." "In exchange for what?" "Nothing." Augustus met her eyes. "Your son saved my life. I don't measure that debt in money or favors. I measure it in making sure he has the future he deserves." Diane's throat tightened. "Why? You barely know us." "Because he reminds me of someone I couldn't save." Augustus's jaw tightened. "And because somewhere along the way, protecting him stopped being an obligation." "Then what is it?" Augustus watched Chamberlain throw a tennis ball across the lawn, the dog bounding after it with joyful energy. "Family," he said quietly. That evening, Augustus sat Chamberlain down in the library. "Your mom and I have been talking. The apartment, Riverside, you can go back if you want. Everything's safe now." Chamberlain's face fell. "Oh." "Or," Augustus continued, "you can stay here. Different room if you prefer. Closer to the main house. You'd go to a new school, make new friends. Your mom would have her own space." He paused. "But it's your choice. Both of you." Chamberlain twisted his hands together, that observant mind working through implications adults would struggle with. "If we go back, will you still visit?" "Yes." "Every day?" Augustus hesitated, then smiled slightly. "If you want." "I want to stay." The words came out rushed, certain. "I feel safe here. With you. Is that weird?" "No," Augustus said, his voice rougher than intended. "It's not weird." Chamberlain looked up with those intense eyes that saw too much. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "If I stayed, would you teach me stuff? Like how to be strong like you? How to protect people?" Augustus felt something shift in his chest, the final piece of armor he'd carried for decades finally cracking completely. "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." Chamberlain smiled. Bright, genuine, transformative. And Augustus James, the most feared man in Blackwater City, smiled back. 3 months later, Diane moved into a renovated guest house on the property, separate but close, giving her independence while keeping Chamberlain near the main house. Augustus enrolled him in a private school where teachers actually knew his name
and classrooms had books that weren't falling apart. Chamberlain thrived. He still noticed everything, still cataloged details others missed. But now, it wasn't about survival. It was about curiosity. Augustus became a constant presence, teaching him chess, answering endless questions about history and strategy, taking him to the shooting range when he turned 9, and Diane reluctantly agreed. "Not to hurt people," Augustus explained as Chamberlain learned to handle a small caliber weapon. "But to protect yourself, to never be helpless." The boy took to it with the same intense focus he applied to everything. Diane watched from a distance, marveling at the transformation. Her son laughed now, really laughed. The constant tension had left his small shoulders, and Augustus, the monster she'd feared, had become the father Chamberlain never had. One afternoon, nearly a year after the bomb on Willow Creek Lane, Augustus stood beside his new SUV, armored, secure, identical to the one that had nearly killed him. Chamberlain came running across the perfectly manicured lawn, backpack bouncing, shouting something about a school project. Augustus waited, patient, arms crossed, but expression soft. This time, the boy wasn't running to warn him of danger. He was running home, to safety, to family, to the life Augustus had built from the ashes of a debt he'd never be able to fully repay. Chamberlain reached him, breathless and grinning. "Can we stop for ice cream on the way back?" Augustus opened the SUV door. "Get in, kid." As they drove away from the property, Marcus watching from the security gate, Augustus glanced at the boy beside him, this child who'd changed everything with a single act of courage. "Hey, Chamberlain?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For that day. For warning me." Chamberlain looked up, surprised. "You already thanked me like 100 times." "I know." Augustus's voice carried a weight the boy would only understand years later. "But I'll probably thank you 100 more. Because some debts weren't just paid. They were honored, protected, cherished. And Augustus James had finally learned the difference.